The sun hung low over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of burnt orange and deep crimson. Jacob Malone guided his horse along the narrow trail that wound through the canyon, his weathered hand resting on the Winchester rifle across his saddle. He'd been tracking wild horses for the better part of 3 days, hoping to catch a few mustangs to break and sell in town. The ranch wasn't bringing in much these days, and with a 7-year-old boy to feed, every dollar counted. The crack of gunfire echoed through the canyon walls, followed by a woman's scream. Jacob spurred his horse forward, his heart pounding as he rounded a bend in the trail. 3 men on horseback had cornered a young Apache woman against the canyon wall. She clutched a torn basket, herbs and roots scattered across the dusty ground. One of the bandits reached down to grab her arm while another leveled a pistol in her direction. Jacob didn't hesitate. He raised his Winchester and fired a shot into the air. The sharp report bounced off the canyon walls like thunder. "That's far enough, boys." The 3 men wheeled their horses around. The leader, a scarred man with a black beard, spat into the dirt. "This ain't your concern, mister. The Apache took from us. We're just settling accounts." "Looks to me like 3 armed men against 1 unarmed woman. Don't seem like much of an account to settle." Jacob kept his rifle steady, aimed at the leader's chest. "Now I'm going to give you fellas a choice. You can ride out of here peaceful-like, or we can see who's faster." The bearded man's eyes narrowed, calculating. He glanced at his companions, then back at Jacob. After a long moment, he jerked his head toward the trail. "This ain't over, cowboy. You just made yourself some enemies." "Add 'em to the list," Jacob replied. The 3 bandits spurred their horses and disappeared around the bend, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Jacob waited until the sound of hoofbeats faded before lowering his rifle. He dismounted and approached the young woman slowly, holding his hands where she could see them. She stood pressed against the canyon wall, her dark eyes wide but defiant. Her buckskin dress was torn at the shoulder, and a thin line of blood ran down her arm where one of the bandits had grabbed her. She was beautiful, with high cheekbones and black hair that fell past her shoulders, but what struck Jacob most was the fierce pride in her gaze. "Are you hurt, ma'am?" She studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You speak Apache?" "No, ma'am. Just English and a bit of Spanish." "Then we speak English." Her voice was clear and precise, with only a slight accent. "I am called Ahiga. It means, she who fights. My father sent me to gather healing plants for my grandmother. Those men, they come to our camp last week. They steal horses. My brothers chase them away, but they come back for revenge." Jacob knelt and began gathering the scattered plants, placing them carefully back in her basket. "Those men are cowards. They won't be back, not today anyway. But you shouldn't be out here alone. Where's your camp?" 2 days' ride north." She knelt beside him, their hands touching briefly as they both reached for the same route. She pulled back quickly. "I cannot return until I have enough medicine. My grandmother is very sick." Jacob straightened, brushing the dust from his knees. The sun was nearly touching the horizon now, and darkness came fast in the desert. He thought of his son, Tommy, waiting back at the ranch with old Mrs. Henderson, the widow who looked after him when Jacob was away. "Look, Miss Ahiga, it ain't safe for you out here, especially not after what just happened. My ranch is about 2 hours south. You can stay the night, get cleaned up and fed, and I'll help you gather what you need in the morning. Then I'll see you safely back to your people." She hesitated, her pride warring with practicality. Finally, she nodded. "You save my life. I accept your help." They rode double on Jacob's horse, Ahiga sitting behind him with her basket of herbs. She held onto his waist lightly, and Jacob tried not to think about how long it had been since he'd been this close to a woman. His wife, Sarah, had died of fever 3 years ago, leaving him to raise Tommy alone. He'd buried his grief in work, but there were nights when the loneliness felt like a physical weight. "Your people will worry," he said over his shoulder. "They know I am strong. They will wait 3 days before looking for me. It is our way." The ranch appeared as the last light faded from the sky. It wasn't much: a small house, a barn, a corral with a few horses, and 50 acres of scrubland that barely sustained a small herd of cattle. But it was home, and Jacob had built most of it with his own hands. Mrs. Henderson met them at the door, her gray eyebrows rising at the sight of Ahiga. "Jacob Malone, what have you gotten yourself into now?" "Trouble, most likely," Jacob said with a tired smile. "Mrs. Henderson, this is Ahiga. She ran into some difficulty in the canyon. She'll be staying the night." The old woman's expression softened as she saw the blood on Ahiga's arm. "Well, don't just stand there. Bring her inside. I'll fetch some water and bandages." Tommy appeared in the doorway, his sandy hair sticking up in all directions. His eyes went wide at the sight of Ahiga. "Bah! You brought home an Indian." "Tommy." Jacob's voice carried a warning. "This is Miss Ahiga, and she's our guest. Where are your manners?" The boy's face reddened. "Sorry, Pa. I meant—" "Hello, ma'am." Ahiga smiled, and it transformed her face. "Hello, Tommy. You have your father's eyes." Mrs. Henderson bustled them inside, insisting on cleaning Ahiga's wound while Jacob put away the horses. When he returned, he found Ahiga sitting at the kitchen table while Mrs. Henderson applied a bandage to her arm. Tommy sat across from them, staring with undisguised fascination. "Does it hurt?" the boy asked. "I have known worse pain," Ahiga replied. "This is nothing. Did you really fight those bad men?" "Tommy, that's enough questions," Jacob said. "Miss Ahiga needs rest, not an interrogation." Mrs. Henderson stood, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'll be heading home now, Jacob. Got my own supper to see to. I'll be back tomorrow morning to watch Tommy while you work." After the widow left, an awkward silence settled over the kitchen. Jacob realized he hadn't thought about supper. Sarah had always handled the cooking, and since her death, he and Tommy had made do with simple fare, beans, bacon, and whatever Mrs. Henderson prepared. "I can cook," Ahiga said, as if reading his thoughts. "You gave me shelter. I must give something in return." "You don't have to." "I want to." She stood and surveyed the kitchen. "You have deer meat?" "Smoked venison in the smokehouse. Some potatoes in the cellar. Not much else, I'm afraid." "It is enough." Jacob watched as Ahiga moved through his kitchen with quiet confidence. She found what she needed without asking, her movements efficient and graceful. She diced the venison and potatoes, added some wild onions she'd gathered, and created a stew that soon filled the house with rich, savory aromas. She also made a simple bread, mixing flour and water with some herbs from her basket, then cooking it on a flat stone she heated in the fireplace. "My mama used to make bread like that," Tommy said, watching her work. "But it didn't smell as good." "These herbs make it special," Ahiga explained. "Sage and juniper. They are sacred to my people." When they sat down to eat, Jacob couldn't remember the last time he'd tasted anything so good. Tommy ate 3 helpings, chattering between mouthfuls about his adventures at school and the fort he was building in the barn. Ahiga listened patiently, asking questions that made the boy beam with pride. After supper, Jacob tucked Tommy into bed while Ahiga cleaned the kitchen. When he returned, he found her standing by the window, looking out at the star-filled sky. "Thank you for the meal," he said. "It's been a long time since this house felt alive." "Your wife," Ahiga said quietly. "She is gone. 3 years now. Fever took her quick. One day she was fine, the next." He trailed off, the old grief tightening his chest. "My mother also died of fever. I was 12. I know the emptiness you carry." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Finally, Jacob cleared his throat. "You can have my bed. I'll sleep in the barn." "No. I will sleep by the fire. It is what I know." Jacob brought her blankets and made sure the fire was banked for the night. He hesitated at the door to his room. "Those men from the canyon, they might come looking for you. They are cowards. Cowards do not ride at night." But she touched the knife at her belt. "Still, I will be ready." Jacob slept fitfully, his hand on the rifle beside his bed. But the night passed quietly, and when he woke at dawn, he found Ahiga already up. She'd rekindled the fire and was preparing breakfast, eggs from the henhouse and more of her herb bread. "You did not have to." "I wanted to," she said, echoing her words from the night before. Over breakfast, Jacob studied her face in the morning light. There was a sadness in her eyes that matched his own, a shared understanding of loss. But there was also strength and kindness, and something else he couldn't quite name. "I'll take you to gather those herbs today," he said. "Then we'll figure out how to get you home safe." They spent the morning in the canyon, with Tommy tagging along despite Jacob's protests. The boy had taken a shine to Ahiga, and she seemed to enjoy his company, teaching him the names of plants and their uses. Jacob watched them together and felt something shift in his chest. Not quite happiness, but the possibility of it. By noon, Ahiga's basket was full. They returned to the ranch for lunch, and Ahiga once again prepared the meal. She moved through the kitchen like she belonged there, and Jacob found himself imagining what it would be like if she stayed. After lunch, while Jacob was checking the horses, he heard Tommy and Ahiga talking in the house. He paused outside the open window, not meaning to eavesdrop but unable to help himself. "Do you have to go?" Tommy asked. "Can't you stay longer?" "Your father has been very kind, but I must return to my people. My grandmother needs this medicine. But Pa likes you. I can tell. He smiles more when you're here. He don't smile much anymore. Your father is a good man." "He's lonely," Tommy said with a child's blunt honesty. "And I'm lonely too. It's just been us for so long. But when you're here, it feels like we're a family again." Jacob's throat tightened. He moved away from the window, not wanting to hear more. When he came back inside, he found Ahiga standing at the table, her hands gripping the edge. "I should go now," she said without looking at him. "The day is still young. I can make good distance before dark." "Ahiga." "Thank you for your help, Jacob Malone. You are a man of honor." But before she could move toward the door, Tommy burst out of his room. He ran to Ahiga and wrapped his arms around her waist. "Please don't go yet. Please. Tommy, son, Miss Ahiga has family waiting for her." "But Pa, you're happier when she's here too. Let her stay some more time with us." The words hung in the air. Jacob looked at Ahiga and saw his own loneliness reflected in her eyes. 3 years he'd been alone, convincing himself it was enough to focus on Tommy and the ranch. 3 years of eating cold beans and watching his son grow up without a mother's love. "The boy speaks truth," Ahiga said softly. "You are happier. I see it. What about you?" Jacob asked. "Are you happy here?" She looked around the simple kitchen, at the worn table and the fire crackling in the hearth. She looked at Tommy, still clinging to her, and finally at Jacob. "My grandmother's medicine can wait 1 more day," she said. "Perhaps 2. If you would have me." Tommy whooped with joy, and Jacob felt a smile spread across his face. A real smile, the kind he hadn't felt in years. "We'd be honored to have you stay, for as long as you like." That evening, they ate dinner together again, and afterward, Ahiga told stories of her people while Tommy listened with rapt attention. She spoke of Coyote the trickster, of Spider-Woman who taught her people to weave, of the mountain spirits who protected the Apache. Her voice rose and fell like music, and Jacob found himself drawn not just to her beauty but to her spirit, her strength, her gentle wisdom. After Tommy fell asleep, Jacob and Ahiga sat by the fire again. This time, the silence between them felt different, charged with possibility. "My grandmother taught me," Ahiga said, "that the spirits sometimes bring people together for a reason. She said we must be brave enough to accept their gifts." "And do you think this is a gift?" Jacob asked. "Us meeting the way we did? I think those bandits were sent to lead me to you. I think your son is wise beyond his years. And I think—" She paused, meeting his eyes. "I think 3 years is long enough to carry grief alone." Jacob reached out and took her hand. Her fingers were warm and strong, calloused from work, real and alive. "Stay," he said. Not just for a few days. Stay and let us see where this path leads. My people. We'll go to them together. I'll speak with your father. Do this properly. But Ahiga, I haven't felt this way since Sarah. I know it's fast, I know it's crazy, but... It is not crazy, she said. My people believe you can know someone's heart in a moment. I know yours, Jacob Malone. It is good and true. Then you'll stay. She smiled, and it was like the sun coming out after a storm. I will stay. For now, and perhaps for always. If your heart is willing. It is, Jacob said. God help me, it is. They sat together by the fire, hands joined, while outside the desert wind whispered through the sage. In his room, Tommy slept peacefully, dreaming perhaps of the family they might become. And somewhere in the canyon, the stars shone down on the place where a cowboy had saved an Apache girl, not knowing he was really saving himself. The next morning, Jacob woke to the smell of coffee and fry bread. He found Ahiga in the kitchen, humming a song in her own language. Tommy sat at the table, already eating, his face bright with happiness. Morning, Pa, the boy called. Miss Ahiga is teaching me Apache words. Did you know she can speak 3 languages? Is that so? Jacob poured himself coffee and sat down beside his son. English, Spanish, and Apache, Ahiga confirmed. My father believed we must understand the world around us to survive in it. Your father sounds like a wise man. I'd like to meet him. Then we will go to him tomorrow. I will tell him of what happened, and of your bravery. He will want to thank you himself. And... Jacob prompted gently. Ahiga's eyes met his, warm and certain. And I will tell him I wish to stay here, if he gives his blessing. That I have found a good man and a sweet child who need me as much as I need them. Tommy looked between them, his eyes widening as understanding dawned. Does that mean you're gonna be my new mama? Tommy, Jacob started, but Ahiga held up a hand. Not your new mama, she said gently. Your mama will always be your mama. Nothing changes that. But perhaps I could be something else. A friend. A second mother. Someone who loves you and cares for you. I'd like that, Tommy said solemnly. I'd like that a lot. Jacob felt tears prick his eyes. He reached across the table and took Ahiga's hand again, marveling at how natural it felt, how right. They prepared for the journey north the following dawn. Jacob's father, Thomas Malone, came down from his room as they loaded the horses. The older man, 65 with silver threading through his dark hair, moved carefully with a cane, but his eyes were sharp and observant. Jacob, son, where are you headed? To the Apache camp, Pa. I need to speak with Ahiga's father. Thomas studied Ahiga for a long moment, then looked at his son with an expression that was both knowing and approving. I see. Well, this young woman is far too fine to have been gathered in a canyon with bandits. There's a story here. There is, Jacob said. When I get back, we'll talk properly. You're a good man, Jacob. Your mother would be proud of the father you've become. And I suspect she'll be very pleased with the choice you're about to make. The old man smiled at Ahiga. Welcome to our family, child. Formally or informally, you're already part of us. Ahiga's eyes glistened with tears. Thank you, sir. You are kind. Just call me Thomas. We don't stand on ceremony in the desert, girl. The ride north took them through country that grew progressively wilder and more beautiful. Rocky outcroppings gave way to pine forests as they climbed higher into the mountains. Ahiga rode ahead, and Jacob followed with Tommy on the horse in front of him. The boy chattered constantly, asking Ahiga questions about her family and her people. They crested a ridge as the sun approached its zenith, and below them, nestled in a valley, Jacob saw the Apache camp. Dozens of wickiups, brush structures that seemed to grow from the earth itself, were arranged in a circle. Smoke rose from several fires. Men tended horses while women worked hides and gathered wood. As they descended the slope, warriors on horseback moved to intercept them. Ahiga called out in Apache, and Jacob understood enough to know she was telling them to stand down. The warriors' posture relaxed, and they gestured for the newcomers to approach. A man stepped forward from near the largest wickiup. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with the same sharp features as Ahiga, though his face was carved deep with lines earned from years of leading his people. This was Ahiga's father. "Ahiga!" he called out, and his daughter urged her horse forward, dismounting and running to embrace him. They spoke rapidly in Apache, and Jacob watched the father's expression shift from joy at seeing his daughter alive to barely contained rage as she explained what had happened in the canyon. The man's dark eyes fixed on Jacob with an intensity that made it clear he was assessing a potential threat or rival. Ahiga walked her father back toward Jacob and Tommy. Up close, he was even more imposing. "I am Geronimo's nephew," the man said in careful English. "My name is Dakota. My daughter tells me you saved her life from men who would have killed her for sport. She also tells me you are a man of honor and that you have made her welcome in your home." Jacob dismounted, keeping his hands visible and his posture humble. "That's the truth of it, sir. Your daughter is a remarkable woman. When I look at her, I see intelligence, strength, and kindness. When I look at my son's face when she's near, I see him happy in a way I haven't seen since his mother died." Dakota studied Jacob in silence for a long moment. Finally, he gestured toward the camp. "Come. We will eat together. You will tell me everything." The feast that night was an extraordinary affair. Ahiga and the other women prepared venison, roasted mescal, and various dishes Jacob couldn't identify but found delicious. Dakota sat across a fire from Jacob, with Tommy between them, and they talked for hours. Jacob learned that Dakota had lost his own wife years ago and understood the loneliness of raising a child without a partner. He learned about Apache traditions and beliefs. And he found that beneath the fierce warrior's exterior was a father who simply wanted his daughter to be happy and safe. As the night wore on, Dakota leaned back and lit a pipe. "Your son calls your woman Ahiga. He does not call her mother, and she does not accept the name. This shows respect for the dead, and wisdom on her part. My daughter is a practical woman. She would not erase the memory of your first wife. She would add to your family's life, not replace what was lost." "That's exactly how I see it," Jacob said. "Then I give you my blessing," Dakota said. "But Ahiga will not be your property. She will not be a white man's property. She remains my daughter, and she remains Apache. If she chooses to live with you, she chooses with her full heart and mind. And if she wishes to return, you will not prevent her." "I would never dream of it," Jacob said. "I respect her too much." Dakota smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his face. He reached across and gripped Jacob's shoulder firmly. "Then we are not enemies, Jacob Malone. We are brothers in a way. We both love the same woman and the same boy." The next morning, Ahiga prepared to leave with Jacob and Tommy. She carried gifts from her family, a beautiful Apache blanket woven with intricate patterns, pottery for the kitchen, and pouches of healing herbs. Dakota walked them to the horses and embraced his daughter. "Be happy," he said to her. "That is all I want. To know you are safe and happy." "I will be, father," Ahiga replied. "And I will visit. I will not abandon my people." "I know," Dakota said. "And I am grateful for that." The ride back to the ranch seemed shorter, though the path was the same. Jacob found himself humming again, and Tommy chattered excitedly about showing Ahiga his fort in the barn. Ahiga rode between them, and several times Jacob caught her smiling to herself, the smile of someone who had found exactly what she was looking for. When they arrived back at the ranch in the late afternoon, Thomas was waiting on the porch. The old man had prepared a feast. He'd sent a hand into town for supplies, and the kitchen was already fragrant with cooking food. "Well," Thomas said, looking at Ahiga, "I suppose we have much to celebrate. Jacob, your mother would have loved to be here for this. She had a gift for seeing into people's hearts. I think she would have seen what I see, a young woman of great spirit and courage." That evening, Jacob stood with his father on the porch while Ahiga and Tommy prepared supper together in the kitchen. They could hear the boy laughing and Ahiga's patient voice teaching him how to properly knead dough. "I lost your mother when Tommy was just a baby," Thomas said quietly. "And I watched you grieve for 3 years, thinking you'd lost your chance at happiness. I'm glad to see I was wrong. She came out of nowhere, Pa. Just appeared in a canyon like she was meant to find me." "That's what love does," Thomas said. "It finds you when you stop looking. Now, I assume you'll be wanting to marry this girl." "Soon," Jacob said. "If she'll have me. Once things settle and we've had time to know each other better." "Don't wait too long," the old man advised. "Life is precious and short. Grab hold of it while you can." Over the following weeks, Ahiga became part of the rhythm of ranch life. She and Tommy worked together in the kitchen, preparing meals that became legendary among the hands who worked for Jacob. She learned English faster, and Jacob began learning Apache in return. They would sit by the fire in the evenings, and he would teach her about his life before the ranch, before Sarah, before grief had nearly consumed him. One evening, about a month after Ahiga's arrival, Jacob found her in the kitchen alone, looking out the window at the sunset. "Ahiga, I've been thinking about something, and I've been trying to figure out how to say it right." She turned to him, her dark eyes reflecting the fading light. "You do not have to use fancy words with me, Jacob. Say what is in your heart." "All right then. I love you. I think I started loving you the moment I saw you standing against that canyon wall, defiant and brave. And I want to marry you. Not because Tommy needs a mother, though he does. Not because my father thinks it's time, though he does. But because you make me feel alive again. You make me believe in the future. Will you marry me, Ahiga?" She reached up and touched his face gently. "Yes," she said simply. "I will marry you. I love you too. I think I started loving you when you risked your life for a stranger. That is when I knew you were the man my spirit had been waiting for." Jacob kissed her then, softly and tenderly, and outside the wind carried the scent of sage and juniper through the desert, blessing them. They were married 2 months later in a ceremony that blended Apache and white traditions. Dakota came with several of his people. Thomas stood as Jacob's witness. Tommy wore his best clothes and grinned the entire time. Ahiga wore a white dress that had belonged to Jacob's mother, altered lovingly by Mrs. Henderson, with Apache beadwork incorporated into the design, a beautiful fusion of 2 worlds. As the sun set on the day of their marriage, Jacob stood with his new wife, watching his son play with some of the Apache children. His father sat in a chair on the porch, smoking a pipe and smiling. The ranch that had felt so empty just months before was now full of laughter and warmth. "You know what Tommy said to me this morning?" Ahiga asked, taking Jacob's hand. "What?" "He said his fort was finally finished. And he said it's the best fort in the whole world because he built it with love and help from people who love him." Jacob pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the reality of her solid warmth against him. "He's a smart boy," Jacob said. "He got that from his mother. The first one, I mean." "Yes," Ahiga agreed. "But he is also learning kindness and courage from you. We are all learning from each other. That is how families grow strong." 2 years passed, and the small ranch became known throughout the territory as a place where Apache and white settlers lived together in peace. Jacob and Ahiga's union had produced a daughter, a beautiful child with Jacob's sandy hair and Ahiga's dark eyes, whom they named Clara Ahiga. Tommy, now 9 years old, had grown into a capable young man who helped his father with the cattle and horses. The ranch had prospered. With Ahiga's knowledge of which plants could be traded in town, and her skill at managing resources, they had expanded their holdings. She had also become something of a healer to the community. Women from town would sometimes ride out to seek her advice, and she treated them with the same kindness and wisdom she showed her own family. One spring morning, Jacob was working in the corral when he heard the sound of hoofbeats. He looked up to see a group of Apache riders approaching. His heart clenched momentarily. In these times, such a sight could mean trouble. But as they drew closer, he recognized Dakota, Ahiga's father, riding at their head. Jacob set down his work and walked to meet them. Dakota dismounted and embraced his son-in-law warmly. Jacob Malone, the Apache leader said. It has been too long since I have visited. My daughter, she is well. Very well, Jacob replied. Come, she's in the house. Tommy and Clara will be excited to see you. Inside, Ahiga's face lit up when she saw her father. She embraced him tightly, speaking rapidly in Apache. Thomas, Jacob's father, emerged from his room to greet the visitors. Though the old man's health had begun to decline, his mind remained sharp, and he had developed a genuine friendship with Dakota over the years. That evening, as they sat around a table laden with food that Ahiga and her visiting Apache relatives had prepared, Thomas raised his glass. To family, the old man said. Not just the family we're born to, but the family we choose. To Ahiga, who brought life back to this ranch and to my son's heart. To Jacob, who had the courage to see a person instead of just skin and tradition. And to all of us here, who have shown that peace is possible when we treat each other with respect and love. Everyone raised their glasses in agreement. Dakota placed his hand on Jacob's shoulder. You have kept your promise, the Apache leader said. My daughter is happy. You did not erase her past. You built a future with her. This makes me proud to call you brother. And you've kept yours, Jacob replied. Ahiga visits her people regularly, and you come here. You could have forbidden her from staying with me, but you trusted her to make her own choice. That takes real strength. Dakota smiled. A man who does not trust his daughter's judgment is a fool. She chose well. As the evening wore on, Tommy and Clara played with the Apache children in front of the fire while the adults talked. Jacob watched his family, the blending of two worlds that had seemed impossible just 2 years before, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. Later that night, after Dakota and his party had retired to the guest house Jacob had built for visiting Apache, Jacob and Ahiga stood on the porch looking out at the stars. My father is proud, Ahiga said softly. He told me tonight that when he first saw you, he wondered if you were a man of honor or a man of folly. Now he knows. You are a man of love, Jacob. There is no greater strength than that. Jacob pulled her close. I was a man of grief when you arrived. You gave me back my life, Ahiga. You gave Tommy a real home again. You gave me a daughter. You saved us, just as much as I saved you. That is the way of true love, she said. It is not one person saving another. It is two people saving each other. The months that followed brought more change to the ranch. Thomas's health continued to decline, but he seemed at peace. He spent his days with his grandchildren, telling them stories of the old frontier and the woman he had loved, Jacob's mother. When asked why he told them so much about someone they would never meet, he smiled. Because memory is how we keep those we love alive, he said. And because Clara needs to know that her father's capacity to love, the thing that drew him to your mother, Ahiga, came from watching his mother love his father through good times and hard times. One autumn morning, Thomas passed away peacefully in his sleep. Jacob and Ahiga found him with a smile on his weathered face, as if he had gone to meet someone he loved very much. The funeral brought together many people. Cowboys Jacob had worked with, townspeople who had come to respect the ranch, and a significant delegation from Dakota's band. Both Christian and Apache rituals were performed, honoring the old man's legacy and his role in bridging two worlds. After the funeral, Dakota approached Jacob with a proposal. My brother, I have been thinking about something. The land where your ranch sits, it is good land. Water in the dry season, grazing for horses, shelter from the harsh winds. I would like to establish a permanent camp nearby. My people could live in peace, and we could trade with the town. Your ranch could serve as a place where we meet as partners, not as enemies. Jacob considered this carefully. It would change things. The town might not accept it easily. The town will accept what we make them accept, Dakota said firmly. But I do not speak of forcing them. I speak of showing them through time that peace is profitable. Trade, honest dealing, mutual respect. These things speak louder than any gun. Jacob nodded slowly. Then let's do it. We'll build this together. Over the next year, a remarkable transformation took place. With Jacob as an intermediary and Ahiga as a bridge between cultures, a settlement began to take shape near the ranch. Apache families established camps on land that Jacob granted them, and a trading post was built. Soon, settlers from the town began coming to trade, and a fragile but real peace began to take root. Tommy, now a young man of 14, worked alongside both Apache and white men, learning the skills of both cultures. He could track like an Apache, ride like a cowboy, and speak both languages fluently. He had become something new, not entirely one world or the other, but a true fusion of both. One evening, as Jacob watched his son help load supplies for trade, Ahiga came to stand beside him. "Do you remember when I first arrived?" she asked. "Like it was yesterday," Jacob said. "I was running from violence and fear. I thought my life would always be about survival in the harshness of the world. But you showed me something different. You showed me that love could be a shelter stronger than any fort. And now, our children will grow up knowing that two peoples can live together. That is a gift you have given not just to me, but to everyone here." "We gave it to each other," Jacob said, taking her hand. As the sun set over the desert, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Jacob reflected on the strange and wonderful journey that had brought him to this moment. He thought of the day he'd ridden out looking for wild horses and instead found something infinitely more valuable. A second chance at life, a woman of remarkable spirit, and the knowledge that sometimes the greatest courage isn't shown in battle, but in opening one's heart to possibility. The ranch prospered. Years passed. Tommy grew into a man and eventually took over much of the day-to-day operations. Clara became fluent in Apache, English, and Spanish, and grew into a woman of rare grace and wisdom. She became a teacher in the settlement, helping both Apache and white children learn to read and understand each other's languages. Jacob aged, as all men do, but the lines on his face were lines of laughter and peace rather than grief and worry. On quiet evenings, he and Ahiga would sit by their fire, sometimes in comfortable silence, sometimes telling the story of how they met to any grandchildren who would listen. "Your grandmother was the bravest woman I ever knew," Jacob would tell them. "She walked into a stranger's house with nothing, and by her kindness and strength, she changed everything. Never forget that one person, acting with courage and love, can transform the world around them." And Ahiga would add, "Your grandfather was a man who could have turned away. He could have left me in that canyon to die. But he chose to see my humanity. That choice created everything good that came after. Remember that sometimes, salvation is as simple as seeing another person truly, and treating them with honor." The canyon where Jacob had first found Ahiga became a sacred place to both their families. They would take pilgrimages there on anniversaries, remembering the moment that everything changed. Young people from both communities would go there seeking guidance or clarity, believing that the spirits had blessed that place. Decades later, when Jacob was old and his children had children of their own, a young Apache boy and a young white girl fell in love near that same canyon. Their families were uncertain about their union, but Jacob and Ahiga gathered them all together. "We have lived this story," Jacob said, his voice still strong despite his age. "We have shown that love transcends the boundaries that others place upon us. If you love each other, if you are willing to work and sacrifice for that love, then we bless your union. Let no one tell you that your love is wrong." The couple married, and the wedding was celebrated by both communities. The traditions blended seamlessly now. There was no longer a stark division between Apache and settler ways. Instead, there was a new culture, born from respect and love, that honored both traditions while creating something entirely new. Jacob died on a spring morning, with Ahiga holding his hand. He was 92 years old, and he had lived a full life, a life he never would have imagined possible on that day in the canyon when he'd heard a woman scream and made the choice to help. At his funeral, Dakota's great-grandson spoke. He was part Apache and part white, fluent in 4 languages, a trader and peacemaker like his ancestors. "Jacob Malone saved my great-great-grandmother," he said. "But more than that, he saved a possibility. He saved the possibility that two peoples, two cultures, could live together in peace. He showed us that honor and love are not things that belong to one people or another. They belong to all people. And he loved my family, not just the Apache side, but all of us, fully and completely." Ahiga lived another 5 years after Jacob's passing. She spent her time teaching, telling stories, and mentoring the young people of the community. When she died, It was said that the wind carried her name through the canyon where she and Jacob had first met, and that anyone who heard it would understand, for one moment, what true love meant. The ranch endured. The settlement grew. The peace they had established lasted. And long after Jacob and Ahiga were gone, people would point to their story as proof that the impossible could become possible when two people had the courage to love beyond the boundaries that others had drawn. In the canyon, on quiet nights, they said you could still hear voices, a man's and a woman's, speaking in English and Apache, telling their story to the wind and the stars, ensuring that future generations would understand that love, true love, has no borders, no boundaries, and knows no ending. The legacy of Jacob and Ahiga lived on through their children and grandchildren. The settlement they had helped create became a model for peaceful coexistence. Where there had once been hostility between Apache and settlers, there was now trade, mutual respect, and genuine friendship. Tommy's son became a lawyer, fighting for the rights of both peoples in the territorial courts. Clara's daughters taught in schools that served both communities, breaking down barriers through education and understanding. The grandchildren married, had children of their own, and spread the values of acceptance and love throughout the region. Years after Jacob's death, a historian came to the settlement to document its origins. She interviewed the oldest residents, those who had known Jacob and Ahiga personally or had heard their stories from those who had. It seems impossible, the historian said, that one man and one woman could change so much, that they could bridge such a divide. Tommy, now gray-haired and in his 60s, smiled at her. My father didn't set out to change the world. He just saw a woman in danger and helped her. He fell in love. He built a family. Everything else followed from that. The world doesn't change through grand gestures. It changes through small acts of kindness, repeated over and over, until they become the new normal. A young woman in the crowd, descended from both Apache and white settlers, spoke up. My great-great-grandfather was a warrior. My great-great-grandmother was a settler's wife. They never would have met if not for Jacob and Ahiga. None of us would exist. But more than that, we wouldn't know that love could transcend these boundaries. That courage could look like opening your heart instead of drawing a gun. On the 50th anniversary of Jacob's death, the entire settlement gathered at the canyon where he and Ahiga had first met. They brought food, blankets, and stories. Apache and white settlers stood side by side, sharing memories of the man and woman who had changed everything. Dakota's descendant, now an old man himself, stood at the entrance to the canyon and raised his arms. Two spirits walk this canyon, he said in both Apache and English. A man who chose compassion over indifference. A woman who chose love over fear. They showed us that our differences do not divide us. They strengthen us. That our stories, when woven together, create something more beautiful than either could alone. As night fell, the people lit fires and told stories. Children played together without thought to the color of their skin or the language they spoke. Musicians played instruments from both cultures, creating melodies that had never existed before. Dancers moved to rhythms that blended tradition with innovation. And in the morning, when the fires had burned down to ash and the people had returned to their homes, the canyon stood silent. But those who believed in such things said they could still feel the presence of Jacob and Ahiga. Their love woven into the very rocks, their spirit carried on the desert wind, their legacy alive in every person who chose compassion over hatred, love over fear, unity over division. The story of Jacob Malone and Ahiga didn't end with their deaths. It lived on in the hearts and minds of everyone who had known them, everyone who had benefited from the peace they had created, everyone who would carry their example forward into the future. In a land that had known so much violence and division, they had shown that another way was possible. In a time when the world seemed determined to keep people apart, they had dared to love across the boundaries that separated them. And in doing so, they had changed everything. The settlement that grew from Jacob's ranch eventually became a town unlike any other in the territory. It had churches and wickiups side by side. Settlers and Apache lived as neighbors, did business together, raised their children together. Intermarriage was no longer scandalous but commonplace. Young people from both cultures studied together, worked together, built a shared future together. The trading post that Jacob and Ahiga had envisioned became one of the most successful commercial enterprises in the region. Tommy's descendants built upon the foundation his parents had laid, creating a network of trade that brought prosperity to both peoples. The wealth that flowed from this enterprise was shared equally, creating a rare form of economic cooperation that drew the attention of economists and social philosophers from back east. Historians would later point to this settlement as one of the few places in the American West where integration happened naturally, without forced government intervention. It happened because two people had the courage to see each other as human beings first, and because they built a community around that principle. The canyon where Jacob had saved Ahiga became a place of pilgrimage. Couples who were marrying across cultural or tribal lines would go there to exchange vows. Young people seeking guidance would camp there and meditate under the stars. Elders would bring children there to teach them the story of how love had bridged the divide. A simple stone monument was erected at the canyon's entrance, placed there by both Apache and settler hands. The inscription, written in English and Apache, read, "Here on this ground, a cowboy and an Apache woman learned that the greatest courage is love. May all who pass this way remember that we are stronger together than apart." Generations lived and died, but the memory of Jacob and Ahiga never faded. They became more than historical figures. They became symbols of what was possible when people chose to see each other's humanity. Their story was told in schoolhouses and around campfires. It was written about in newspapers and later in books. It inspired plays and paintings and songs. But perhaps most importantly, it was lived out every single day in the lives of the people who walked between two worlds, who spoke two languages, who honored two traditions, and who understood that they were the living legacy of a man and a woman who had dared to love when the world told them not to. Jacob and Ahiga never knew how far their love would reach, how many lives it would touch, how many generations would be shaped by the courage they displayed in that canyon on an Arizona afternoon. They never knew that centuries later, people would still speak their names with reverence, still find inspiration in their story, still believe that love could change the world. But on quiet nights in the desert, when the wind whispered through the canyon and the stars shone bright above, they might have known. They might have felt, in some ineffable way, that what they had built together would endure. That their love, planted like a seed in the rocky soil of the frontier, would grow and flourish and spread, transforming everything it touched. And perhaps, in the hearts of everyone who ever came to believe in the power of love to transcend division, in the souls of every couple who chose each other despite the world's opposition, in the spirit of every person who saw another human being truly and chose compassion. Perhaps Jacob and Ahiga were still there, whispering encouragement on the wind, reminding them that love, real love, is the most powerful force that exists. Their story did not end. It simply continued on, generation after generation, carrying forward the message they had lived so courageously, that love knows no boundaries, that courage can be as gentle as opening your heart, and that the future belongs to those brave enough to believe in it.